long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there lived a farm boy from a desert world of Tatooine. He learned to fly skyhoppers through canyons and yearned to leave his home world behind to attend the Imperial Academy. He ends up joining the Rebel Alliance, a rebellion against the Empire, a fascist, tyrannical government with an authoritarian dictator at the center of it all. This farm boy's name was Biggs Darklighter. Biggs became an integral figure in the struggle against a fascist regime. His training at the Imperial Pressfelt Fleet Camp Academy provided valuable skills as a rebel starfighter pilot. But his biggest contribution to the rebellion was planting the idea of joining the rebellion in the head of his childhood buddy, Luke Skywalker. The story of Luke, according to the Empire, is about an orphan boy who became radicalized after finding his family dead from an accidental military strike, who is then indoctrinated into an ancient religion, joins a band of rebel insurgents, and carries out a terrorist attack. Sounds like something citizens might hear on the Galactic Nightly News, right? And this story would appear to hold up unless you actually start putting some thought behind it. Why was Luke orphaned? What was the purpose of this military strike, and why was his family involved? What is this religion about? What were the rebels fighting for? And what led up to this so-called terrorist attack? It's funny how we, as viewers, never called Luke Skywalker a terrorist when he immediately joined an armed resistance movement after an occupational military force murdered his aunt and uncle and burned his home to the ground. Somehow, deep down, we understood. You see, this ancient religion wasn't about a jihad and causing trouble, but rather its principles promote peace, knowledge, and serenity, similar to that of Taoism. The rebellion itself was a natural resistance to an overtly oppressive regime. When you agitate a whole population and back them into a corner with a super weapon pointed directly at them, which spells certain death and destruction. Why is it only the rebels' fault for the death of 300,000 lost lives? Can there not be any criticism for the driving, oppressive force that incited the situation to occur in the first place? Is there not a broader story to this history? Or, for those indulging the Empire, superficially only focusing on this one occurrence as if it's a monolith? It may still be a surprise to fans of Star Wars to know that the original conception of the saga was very political, even if the final product's political nature was more subtle or non-existent to the average movie viewer. I'm a firm believer that fiction has the ability to convey powerful concepts, ideas, and commentary in more palpable ways than straight-up history lessons. I believe George Lucas thought the same way. Compared to other sci-fi properties with political commentary, Star Wars succeeded in the most masterful way, not just in the success of the franchise, which it has shown in spades through the generations, but also in the manner in which ideas are expressed. As Lucas was developing Episode 4, A New Hope, he spent 4 years working on Apocalypse Now. His time invested in researching the Vietnam War was one of the primary inspirations for Star Wars, equating the rebellion to the Viet Cong and the Empire to America. In an audio commentary on the 2004 re-release of Return of the Jedi, he said that the Viet Cong served as his inspiration for the furry, forest-dwelling Ewoks, who were able to defeat a vastly superior opponent in spite of their primitive weapons. In an interview with James Cameron in 2018, Cameron pointed out how the rebels are a small group using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. Today, the rebels would be called terrorists, Lucas replied. When I did it, they were Viet Cong. he also explained that Star Wars was a vessel in which to place his worldview, that the United States had become an empire during the Vietnam War, doomed to fail like every empire before it. We're fighting the largest empire in the world, and we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats that don't know nothing, he continued. The irony is that in both of those, the little guys won. The highly technical empire, the English empire, the American empire, lost. That was the whole point. In a 2005 interview in the Chicago Tribune, Lucas said Star Wars was a reaction to Nixon's presidency. He said it was really about the Vietnam War, and that was the period where Nixon was trying to run for a second term, which got me to thinking historically about how do democracies get turned into dictatorships? Because the democracies aren't overthrown, they're given away. Palpatine's statement in Revenge of the Sith that he is the Senate reflects Nixon's statement to David Frost. Well, when the president does it, that means that it's not illegal. There were plenty of inspirations of thematic elements drawn upon from history throughout the films, like ancient Rome being the inspiration for political institutions, the Senate, Republic, Empire, and the pod races resembling chariot races. The Jedi bear similarities to Japanese samurai, Shaolin monks, and the Knights Templar. The Cold War and the threat of weapons of mass destruction inspired the Death Star. The British colonialism against young America and the Revolutionary War inspired the Empire to have British accents. And last but not least, the connection to Hitler and Nazi Germany. In a 2005 interview with History, Lucas clarified that Star Wars harkens back to World War II and the Nazis. Some of the similarities include, but are not limited to, the slow rise of Palpatine as the head of state, who directs policy solely through his will, a colossal industrial apparatus that views individuals as disposable assets, the Imperial officers' uniforms, Darth Vader's helmet design, copious amounts of money spent on the military, racism by favoring humans over the galaxy's plethora of alien species, and the shared name of paramilitary fighters called stormtroopers. Quick comment about government agents: when you are the law and you cover your face, it's because you know most people find what you're doing to be morally reprehensible. If you think that the political commentary stops at the original trilogy, you'd be wrong. Going back to that interview with James Cameron noted that those views had carried over into the prequel trilogy, particularly in Padme's line, "This is how liberty dies," with thunderous applause. Some conservative outlets attacked Revenge of the Sith for its apparent allegories with George W. Bush era of American politics and wars, to which Lucas heartily confirmed that was the entire point. Heck, even Newt Gunray, a greedy space capitalist in Star Wars, was named after Newt Gingrich and Ronald Reagan. Looking further into political commentary for each generation, the destruction of Jeddah is one of the most catastrophic events we've seen in Star Wars canon. This single event brings light to just about all of the terrible aspects of the Empire: authoritarian control, industrial colonialism, exploitation, occupation, and genocide. With each generation of Star Wars content that is released, the political messaging seems to correlate with the times and current events. Episodes 4, 5, and 6 had socio-political commentary about Vietnam, the Nazis, and America. The prequels 1, 2, and 3 commented about the Bush-era wars, corporate greed, and the invasion of Iraq. As for the sequels 7, 8, and 9, unfortunately Lucas never got the chance to finish his vision for these 3 films as the property was sold to Disney. However, thanks to commentary from Lucas in the book James Cameron's Story of Science Fiction, where he gave details as to what he envisioned for the original trilogy, which would have translated into the final trilogy itself. And the political commentary, I feel, would have splintered fans, particularly within religious communities. Search for info on Journal of the Whills if you're interested. If George Lucas had been able to complete his story the way he intended, Star Wars would have challenged and criticized the idea of destiny, fulfillment of prophecy, and the concept of the chosen one. Looking forward to the standalone film Rogue One, in particular with the scenes of Jedha, we see a clearly Middle Eastern setting getting orbitably bombarded to oblivion, decimating and genociding an entire people group from existence. Something I believe still resonates to this day. And now with both seasons of Andor, the commentary has expanded more yet. To further dig into the aftermath of Jedha, the laser blast from the Death Star 1 left the planet completely uninhabited and caused catastrophic conditions throughout the planet, like lava flows, epic disruption of oceans, and atmospheric storms due to the fracturing of the planet's core. Despite all the destruction the Empire created, they continued to mine the planet for kyber crystals using astromech droids. The Empire declared Jedha off limits and issued a sentence that anyone going to the system without authorization would be killed on sight as a suspected rebel. Despite this, the few members of Saw Gerrera's partisans who survived the blast stuck around to disrupt and resist. If we were to apply this story to our reality, I see similarities to what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank currently, and sadly, a potentially grim future of total expulsion and annihilation, followed by rampant capitalism exploiting the situation for maximal profits. If we can't utilize fiction, like George Lucas's original vision, to learn concepts like environmental destruction, genocide, and rebellion, to then learn themes like courage, freedom, and hope of overcoming evil, then I don't know what we're doing. As for Andor, there were a number of scenes that stood out, but one of the scenes that left an imprint on viewers in the second season was the Gorman Massacre. This scene showed the depths of the depravity within the ranks of the Empire, as well as exploiting those in lower ranks, and how those in proximity to power leveraged the maintenance of that power and control over the lives of many individuals. In our reality, throughout history, I can see parallels to the Gorman Massacre through several events. Occurrences like Bloody Sunday, where March 7, 1965, 600 peaceful protesters approached the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and were met with police nightsticks and tear gas. In Tiananmen Square on June 4, 1989, at least 1 million protesters, mostly students, were met with tanks without provocation, which were then sent in to fire on them and massacred countless amount of the protesters. During the 2018 Great March of Return, Palestinians would peacefully gather near the apartheid fences dividing Israel and Palestine, while Israeli snipers would maim 30,000 and kill 266 unarmed, non-violent, peaceful protesters. I can even recount an example on June 1st, 2020, when Trump had authorities use violence against peaceful protesters in order to get a weird photo op with a Bible. In all of these cases, including that in Andor, violence was used against non-violent protesters in order to maintain power and control through fear and violence. During a 2005 interview with the Boston Globe, Lucas said, "I love history. So while the psychological basis of Star Wars is mythological, the political and social bases are historical." The message at the heart of Star Wars still speaks to the events of this time and connects to the world's underlying issues despite being divorced from overt political context, because the story of the fight against tyranny never gets old. I personally didn't understand how those in the Star Wars universe could let a tyrannical government takeover happen again, but now in 2025, I can sort of see how it might be possible. And so, this unassuming space opera setting serves as a reminder that history often repeats itself in different times and different places. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, be sure to stick around for the next one. This is only part 1 in my Star Wars trilogy episodes. Next episode digs into the book The Rise and the Fall of the Galactic Empire by Dr. Chris Kempshall. If you enjoy this content, share this with a friend who also likes Star Wars. I'd really appreciate it if you rated and reviewed this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you can. The music used in this episode is copyright free. A big thank you for Luis Humanoid for making his music available. Check him out on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay curious, keep an open mind, and may the Force be with you always.